The forest door slammed against the night. A figure stepped out of the black tree line and the whole crowd pulled back, not because they chose to, but because something ancient in their blood screamed move before their minds caught up. The lanterns burned bright between the old oaks, beautiful to the point of cruelty. 17 pairs had been bonded tonight. 17 times the sound of a mate bond snapping into place, a sound you feel more than hear than a name was called. And nothing answered. The silence stretched so long that a child's careless laugh cut through it like a blade. 4 years, the same gray dress, the same invisibility the girl at the farthest table had learned to wear like a second skin. They whispered about the stranger from the mountains. They say he killed his own. Why had he come here? Why would he want her? Amber eyes. Scars faded silver with time. He climbed 3 steps, stopped in front of her, and there, beneath 100 held breaths, he reached out and closed his hand around hers. The lanterns were beautiful. That was the thing about Ridgecrest's mating ceremonies. They always made everything look beautiful. Paper lanterns strung between the old oaks. Amber light falling soft across tables loaded with honey cakes and spiced wine. Laughter floating up into the night sky like it weighed nothing at all. Like none of this was hard, like everyone here belonged. Clara Dawn sat at the table farthest from the platform. The one half hidden behind the elder oak's massive trunk. The one where the lantern light didn't quite reach. She'd found it 4 years ago by accident. Now she found it on purpose. Same gray dress. 4th ceremony in this dress. She'd stopped counting which ceremony. She hadn't stopped counting the years. 23 years old. Still here. Still at this table. She'd tried tonight. She had. Braided her dark hair tight. Scrubbed the garden dirt from under her nails, pinched color into her cheeks before walking out the door, stood in front of the small mirror in her grandmother's cottage for almost 10 minutes trying to see something worth choosing. She'd given up after 9. Around her, the ceremony hummed. Voices layered over voices. Silk dresses catching the light. The electric anticipation of people who still believe tonight might change everything. For them, it might. Did you see Petra's dress? The voice drifted from the next table. Clara didn't look custom-made, from the northern city. She's been waiting for Alpha Row all season. Well, she's perfect for him. Strongest bloodline in 3 territories, their pups will be. Clara stopped listening. She was good at that now. The selective deafness of a woman who'd learned that overhearing things was almost always worse than staying ignorant. She looked at her cup instead, watered-down wine. The same cup she'd been nursing for an hour. If she drank it too fast, she'd have to get another one. And getting another one meant walking through the crowd. And walking through the crowd meant eyes. And eyes meant Clara. She looked up. Old Aldrich stood beside her table. The pack's healer. 70 if he was a day. Hands that smelled permanently of yarrow and pine resin and something bitter she'd never been able to name. He had kind eyes. The kind that had seen too much disappointment to be surprised by any of it. He was looking at her the way people look at stray dogs in the rain. She hated that look. You shouldn't be sitting back here alone, he said, quietly, like it was a secret between them. I have a good view from here. She kept her voice bright. Practiced. Better angle on the platform. Aldrich sat down across from her, without being invited. He looked out at the ceremony grounds. Looked back at her, Clara. I'm fine, Aldrich. I know you are. He didn't believe it. She didn't believe it. They both sat with the lie for a moment, being polite about it. Aldrich, she met his eyes. I'm fine, he sighed, patted her hand once, stood, moved back toward the crowd without another word, which was the right call. There wasn't anything else to say. She watched him disappear into the light. Turned her attention back to the platform, where Alpha Whitmore was preparing to begin. Ancient by wolf standards, nearly 70, still commanded a room with just his posture. She'd heard this speech before. 4 times before, brothers and sisters of Ridgecrest. Tonight, under the harvest moon, we gather to honor our most sacred tradition. She could recite it in her sleep. When I call your name, step forward. The moon goddess will guide worthy alphas to choose their mates. Trust in her wisdom. Trust in our ways. The ceremony began. Names called. Females stepping forward. Alphas choosing. That unmistakable snap of mate bonds forming. A sound you felt more than heard. Like a door closing softly in a part of yourself you didn't know had been open. Clara watched 17 pairings happen. 17. She counted because she needed to do something with her hands. Petra was chosen first. Obviously. Alpha Row practically ran up to the platform. The crowd cheered loud enough to shake the lanterns, then Gemma, then Sylvie. Then the Harker sisters, both in the same ceremony, which hadn't happened in 30 years, and everyone thought that was extraordinary and wonderful and worth talking about for years, one by one. The pool of unmated females growing smaller, Clara's wine got warm. And then, Clara Dawn, the name landed like a stone dropped into still water. The chatter stopped. Heads turned. She could feel the direction of attention shift, all of it at once, toward the table behind the oak tree where the lanterns didn't reach. She stood. Her legs worked. That was something. She walked to the platform with her gaze down, which was a choice, because she knew what she'd see if she looked up. The particular expression people wore when they felt sorry for someone and didn't want to be caught feeling it. The quick glances away. The small adjustments of posture that meant this is uncomfortable and I am glad it is not happening to me. She'd memorized all of it. Years ago, 3 wooden steps up to the platform. She stood in the designated spot, clasped her hands in front of her to stop them shaking. Alpha Whitmore spoke. His voice heavy with something he was trying to keep out of it. Clara Dawn, daughter of the late Robert and Helen Dawn, presents herself to be chosen. Silence. She counted heartbeats. 1, 2, 5, 10. Somewhere in the crowd, a child laughed at something unrelated. The sound cut through the quiet like a blade. Not cruel, just real. Life going on around the edges of her humiliation, indifferent as weather. No Alpha moved. She'd known. She had known this would happen. Known it the way you know winter is coming. Not because you want to believe it, but because you've lived through enough of them to stop being surprised. The knowing didn't help. It never helped. The knowing just meant you got to feel the humiliation twice. Once in anticipation. Once in the actual moment, Alpha Whitmore drew a slow breath. Perhaps I'll take her. The voice came from the edge of the ceremony grounds, deep, rough. Like gravel shifting under real weight, every head swiveled. A figure stepped out from the tree line. Clara turned with everyone else, and stopped. He was... large was not the right word. Large suggested something that could still fit inside a normal conception of size. This man didn't fit. He was tall enough that he seemed to compress the space around him just by occupying it. Shoulders that blocked the lantern light behind him. Dark hair falling to his collar. A face of harsh angles and old scars that caught the amber light in ways that didn't soften anything. Eyes that glowed amber, fixed on her. The crowd parted. Not because they chose to. Because something in their lizard brains said move before their conscious minds caught up. Clara had never seen him before. Nobody here had. She could tell by the sound the crowd made. That sharp collective intake, that sudden absence of voices, that specific silence that falls when something has entered a room that the room was not prepared for. He walked toward the platform with the economy of movement that comes from either supreme confidence or supreme danger. Probably both. He moved like something that had never once questioned whether it belonged in a room. He climbed the platform steps, 3 steps. Easy. Like he'd been climbing things all his life and found them all inadequate. He stood in front of Clara. Up close, she could see the scars more clearly. One through his left eyebrow, running all the way to the edge of his eye. Another along his jaw, old enough to have faded to silver. His face was not handsome in any comfortable sense of the word. It was striking. The way cliff faces are striking. You notice them. You don't forget them. You don't necessarily want to be standing at the edge of one. He looked at her, not past her, not through her, at her. The specific, direct, deliberate look of someone actually seeing what they're looking at. Clara had forgotten what that felt like. Alpha Whitmore found his voice first. He stepped forward, squaring himself up. The protective instinct of a man who'd led a pack for 30 years. And you are? The stranger didn't look away from Clara. Kaelin Dusk. He said it like a fact. Like weather. Alpha of Shadowfen Pack. He turned to Whitmore then. Just briefly. I'm claiming this female as my mate. The ceremony grounds exploded. Shadowfen. The name moved through the crowd like a current. Clara heard fragments. Pieces of sentences breaking apart in the noise. The pack from the mountain territory heard their alpha killed his own. Why would he come here? Why would he want her? That last one. That one she heard clearly, because she was thinking it too. She stood very still on the platform while chaos happened around her. While Whitmore argued protocol, and counselors appeared from nowhere with objections. while the crowd surged and whispered and made calculations, while every social structure in the Ridgecrest pack adjusted itself in real time to accommodate this impossible variable. Kaelin Dusk stood beside her and ignored all of it, like the noise was weather. Like weather was beneath his concern. Whitmore stepped between them, his aged face set firm. Alpha Dusk. The ceremony has protocols. You cannot simply appear and... The ceremony allows any unmated alpha to choose an unmated female. Kaelin's voice carried without effort, like it was used to not having to be raised. I've chosen. Unless your traditions are decorative, a muscle in Whitmore's jaw moved. The challenge was clean. Efficient. Deny Kaelin. And Whitmore admitted the ceremony was theater. Accept him, and he allowed a complete stranger from a pack with a brutal reputation to walk away with one of his own. Clara found her voice. It came out smaller than she'd intended. That annoyed her. I don't understand. She looked up at him. You don't know me? Kaelin's amber eyes moved back to her face. I know enough. That's not an answer. No, he agreed. It isn't. Something in the crowd shifted. A new voice, smooth and practiced and wrong in the way that political voices are always slightly wrong. Councillor Pembroke materialized from the crowd the way political men always materialized, appearing to have been nearby all along, as though proximity was coincidence. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. His smile was already in place. I'm certain we can reach a reasonable understanding, which meant, name your price to go away. Kaelin didn't look at him. There's nothing to discuss. I've made my choice according to your traditions. The female accepts or rejects. Those are the only two options that matter. Every eye turned to Clara. Her mind moved fast. She was good at moving fast in her head. Always had been. While her body was small and her wolf was quiet, her mind had always been the thing that ran ahead. Option 1, refuse. Walk back to that table behind the oak. Sit down. Come back next year. Come back the year after that, Dennis. Come back until she was 30 and then 40, and then it stopped being a ceremony and started being a ritual of public accounting. Here is Clara Dawn. Still here, still unclaimed, still not quite enough to F. 2. Say yes to a stranger from a pack known for violence. Leave tonight. Leave everything. Go somewhere no one has ever been kind to her. But at least no one has been kind to her there yet, so she can't miss it. She'd framed it wrong. She knew she'd framed it wrong, because there was a third thing underneath both options, and it was this. She was 23 years old, and she was tired. Not sad tired, not broken tired. Just the specific exhaustion of spending years being invisible in a place that was supposed to be home. And this man, this terrifying, scarred, enormous man who had walked out of the dark and claimed her in front of everyone. This man had looked at her, not past her, at her. Don't be sentimental, she told herself. That's not enough. One look is not enough. She looked at Kaelin Dusk. What exactly are you offering? Something shifted in his expression. She couldn't name it. A surprise, maybe. Or something adjacent to approval, a mate bond, a place in my pack, protection. Why me? Not a question, a demand. You could have chosen anyone here. Stronger wolves. More I could, he said, simply, cutting her off without aggression, just fact. I'm choosing you. That's still not an answer. No, he held her gaze. But it's the truth, and somehow that was exactly the thing, not romantic, not kind particularly. But true in a way she hadn't expected. He wasn't performing generosity. He wasn't pretending this was something it wasn't. He was standing here, in front of an entire pack, saying, I'm choosing you with the flat, undecorated certainty of someone who'd made a decision and wasn't interested in arguing about it. Whitmore leaned close. His voice dropped. Child, you don't have to do this. We can find another way. Clara looked at him. This man who'd been kind to her, in his way. Who'd called her name at 4 ceremonies and meant well every time. Who would call her name again next year if she asked him to? Another way to what? She asked, quietly. Sit alone at the next ceremony and the one after that? Whitmore's face crumpled. Just slightly. Shadowfen is dangerous. Ridgecrest has always been safe, she finished. And let the word sit there. He heard it. She could tell he heard it. She turned back to Kaelin. One more thing. Why are you really doing this? She needed to know. Not the version that sounded right. The actual reason. For the first time, he paused. The ceremony grounds had gone quiet again. Everyone straining to hear. The moment stretched, then he leaned down. Close enough that only she would catch it. Because I need a mate before the Autumn Council. And you need someone to choose you. His voice was low, direct, without apology. We both get what we need. That's the truth. It wasn't romantic, but it was honest. And here, tonight, at this table behind this oak, wearing this same gray dress for the 4th time, honesty felt like something real. "One more question," she said. He waited. "Are you going to hurt me?" Something moved across his face. Quick. Like a crack in stone that seals before you can look directly at it. "No," he said it without hesitation. And then, after a beat, something that wasn't quite gentle but was closest to it. "I'm going to protect you. Even from my own pack, if necessary. Especially from my own pack." The way he said it seemed to mean. Clara took a breath. This was insane. She knew this was insane. A woman from a quiet pack in a green valley marrying herself to a mountain alpha with a violent reputation for reasons that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with mutual desperation. But sitting alone at these ceremonies. But watching life happen to other people. But being the story they told with pity when you weren't in the room. "Then I accept," she said. The ceremony grounds broke apart at the seams, voices stacked over voices. Challenges from the counselors, protests from the crowd, someone invoking ancient protocols Clara had never heard of, someone else demanding formal witnesses. Pembroke getting louder about procedure in the specific way of men who use procedure as a weapon. Kaelin ignored all of it. He reached into his coat, produced a ring, dark metal etched with symbols she didn't recognize, worn smooth at the edges in a way that suggested age. He took her hand. His palm was rough, warm against her cold fingers. Clara Dawn, his voice cut through the noise with a quality she'd never quite heard before. Not shouted, just present, taking up all the space available to it. "I claim you as my mate before the moon goddess and these witnesses. Do you accept this bond?" The formal words, the binding words. She'd read about chosen bonds. Her grandmother had explained them once. Late at night, both of them sitting by the fire. "A chosen bond isn't lesser," her grandmother had said. "It's different. It grows where it's tended. Love doesn't have to begin at the beginning to become real by the end." She hoped her grandmother was right. "I accept this bond." He slid the ring onto her finger. Too large. It hung loose, tilted sideways. But the metal warmed immediately against her skin, and that seemed significant somehow. She wasn't sure why. He lifted her hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles. One brief, formal gesture, so completely at odds, with everything about his appearance that her breath caught before she could stop it. "Then it's done," he said. "You're mine now. And I'm yours." The mate bond sparked. Not the explosion she'd heard about. Not the overwhelming, life-rearranging blast of a fated bond. Something quieter. A thread, thin but warm, settling into the center of her chest like it had always known where it was going. She felt it. It was real. "We're leaving," Kaelin announced to the crowd. "Anyone who has a problem with that can challenge me now." Nobody moved. 30 minutes, Alpha Whitmore said. His voice worn down to something tired and genuine. "Let her say goodbye." Kaelin released her hand. "Go pack what matters." His eyes held hers for a moment. Something in them she still couldn't read. "I'll wait here," she ran. Not elegantly, not with any particular dignity. She ran through the parting crowd, past the staring faces, away from the lanterns and the honey cakes, and the sound of 17 successful pairings, still hanging in the air, like music from a party you weren't invited to. She ran to her grandmother's hut at the edge of Ridgecrest Land. 30 minutes. 30 minutes to pack a life. The cottage was dark when she burst through the door. She lit the oil lamp with shaking hands. Golden light filled the small space. One room. Kitchen and bedroom and living space all together. Her grandmother's rocking chair by the cold fireplace. Herbs hanging from the rafters. The narrow bed in the corner where she'd slept every night of her 23 years. What do you take when you're leaving forever? She grabbed her travel pack from the hook by the door and started throwing things inside. Clothes, 2 dresses, a spare shift. Wool stockings for winter, her grandmother's recipe book, pages yellow and stained with use. The small carved wolf her father had made before he died. Small enough to fit in her palm. She was wrapping it in cloth when the door opened. She spun around, Aldrich, standing in the doorway, slightly out of breath. "He must have run, Aldrich. I don't have time." "I know." He stepped inside, closed the door. His healer's bag hung from his shoulder. "I'm not here to stop you." She stared at him. "I'm here to help." Her eyes burned. She didn't want them to. She blinked hard and turned back to her packing. Aldrich moved to her small shelf of supplies with the efficiency of a man who'd spent a lifetime preparing people for things they weren't ready for. He pulled things down without asking. A hairbrush, sewing kit, a tin of wound salve, packets of herbs from his own bag, yarrow for bleeding, willow bark for pain, valerian for sleep. He hesitated, added one more packet, smaller. Wrapped tight, pennyroyal, he said quietly. In case you need to prevent. Aldrich, I'm a healer. It's my job, he didn't look up. I don't believe Kalen Dusk will force himself on you, but you're going to an unknown pack with an unknown alpha. Better to have options, the reality of it, the full weight of what she'd just agreed to. She sat down on the edge of her bed, just for a moment. I'm terrified, she said. Good, he tied her pack closed. Fear keeps you sharp. Don't let it keep you still. He looked at her steadily. You have a mind sharper than any wolf in this pack. A healer's knowledge from years of watching and learning, and now you have a mate bond to an alpha. Those are not nothing, Clara. Those are tools if you're clever enough to use them. She almost laughed. Tools? You've survived being unwanted your entire life. That takes a kind of strength most people will never understand. He lifted the pack, set it near the door. Use it, a knock. Both of them went still, then Kalen's voice, muffled through the wood. It's time, Clara stood. Looked at the cottage one last time, the water stain on the ceiling shaped like a bird in flight, the loose floorboard by the fireplace that creaked if you stepped left of center, the window that never quite closed, letting in winter drafts her grandmother used to pretend weren't there. I wish she was here, Clara said. Not to Aldrich. Just set it into the room. She'd tell you to trust yourself, Aldrich said. He pulled her into a brief, fierce embrace, the smell of yarrow and pine resin, and that bitter thing she'd never identified. Write to me. Let me know you're alive, I will. She put on her cloak, picked up her pack, opened the door. Kalen stood on the threshold. He looked even larger in the narrow frame of her grandmother's door. Behind him, she could see torches from the ceremony grounds. Of course, the whole pack had followed. Of course they were watching. That was the thing about small communities. They watched everything, especially the things that made them uncomfortable. She had not, she realized, actually looked at him until now. Not really. The scar through his left eyebrow ran all the way to the edge of his eye. The one along his jaw curved slightly, old enough to have faded to silver. His hair was dark and slightly too long, and he looked like someone who cut it when he got around to it and didn't particularly care about the gap between those two events. He looked at her pack, took it off her shoulder without asking, slung it over his own like it weighed nothing. Say your goodbyes. He stepped back. Made room. We have a long journey. The walk back through the ceremony grounds was the longest walk of her life. Wolves lined the path, some whispering, some staring without bothering to disguise it. She kept her chin level. She'd practiced that. The art of walking through a crowd that was watching you fail and not showing what it cost. She was good at it by now. Alpha Whitmore waited at the edge of pack territory, his face tired and troubled and kind. Clara, he pressed a small pouch into her hands. Coin, not much. If you need to come home, the kindness nearly broke her. Thank you, she said. For calling my name every year, his expression cracked, just at the edges. Counselor Pembroke hovered nearby, arms crossed, mouth already open for one more procedural objection. The counselors can file a formal complaint with my secretary. Kalen's voice was flat, bored. His hand settled at the small of Clara's back, warm, steady, possessive in a way that somehow also felt like protection. My mate and I are leaving, my mate. The words landed differently than she expected. Not romantic, just real. A statement of fact that also happened to change everything. He guided her past the crowd, past the lanterns still swaying in the night breeze, past the tables of honeycakes going cold, past Petra and Alpha Row, hand in hand, already somewhere else entirely. Past the version of tonight she'd expected and into the version she was walking toward. At the tree line he stopped. Turned to face her. Last chance, he said. Not unkindly, just clearly. The way someone states a fact that doesn't change regardless of how it's received. If you're going to change your mind, do it now. Once we cross into neutral territory, you're committed. Clara looked back at Ridgecrest, at the lanterns, the ceremony grounds, the faces she'd spent 23 years memorizing that had never quite memorized her back. At Aldrich, standing near the tree line, hands clasped, watching with those eyes that had seen too much. He gave her a small nod. She looked back at Kalen. I'm not changing my mind. Something in his face shifted. Not a smile, not warmth exactly, just acknowledgement. The specific look of a man recalibrating an expectation that had been proven wrong. He shifted, and her breath left her body. His wolf was massive. Gray-black, the color of storm clouds just before they open. Shoulders level with her chest. Eyes still that same amber, still that same directness, just larger. Undeniable. A creature built for power and distance and the kind of dark forest they were about to enter. He lowered himself, an invitation. She'd known this part was coming. Her wolf was too small for the journey ahead. Known it the way she knew all her limitations. Practically, without drama, as information to plan around rather than a wound to carry. She climbed onto his back, gripped his fur. He stood in one smooth motion, and then he ran. The world became dark trees and cold air and motion. Ridgecrest disappeared behind them in minutes. The familiar oak groves blurred and vanished. Neutral wildlands opened up around them. Wilder, older, the trees growing taller and closer together, branches locking overhead until the moonlight came through in fragments. Clara held on, the mate bond pulsed with each stride. That thin thread of warmth, still new, still strange. Still, against all logic, real. She wasn't sitting at that table anymore. She wasn't waiting. She was moving. And for right now, for this one specific moment, hurtling through the dark towards something she couldn't see yet. That felt like the most important thing in the world. They stopped near a stream after 2 hours. Kaelin slowed, shifted back. Clara dismounted and turned carefully while he dressed in the spare clothes from her pack. When she looked back, he was pulling a shirt across shoulders that the shirt was not entirely prepared for. "Drink," he said. "Eat if you need to." She knelt by the stream. The cold water shocked her system, cut through the fog of exhaustion, made her feel present and real. "How much further?" she asked. 3 more hours at speed. "We reached Shadowfen before dawn." She cupped more water, sat back on her heels, looked at the unfamiliar stars through a canopy of unfamiliar trees. "You said you need a mate before the Autumn Council," she said. "What happens if you don't have one?" Kaelin leaned against a tree, watching the dark. Perpetually alert, she was realizing. Not nervous, just always aware, pack law, he said. An alpha must be mated to hold position beyond age 30. I turned 30 in 2 months, so if you arrive at the Autumn Council without a mate, every ambitious male in 3 territories treats it as an open challenge. His jaw set. I've held Shadowfen for 8 years, rebuilt it from what my father left. I'm not surrendering it to someone who thinks an outdated law gives them the right. 8 years. She filed that away. What did your father leave? A pause. Nothing worth keeping, he said, and everything that needed to be fixed. She looked at him. He looked at the dark. She decided not to push. Not tonight. What should I expect when we arrive? She asked instead. Your pack. Will they? No. Just that, no? They'll test you, push you. Try to determine whether you're worth the trouble of accepting. He said it without cruelty, which somehow made it worse. This was just information. Shadowfen doesn't do gentle introductions. We have survival. The strong protect the weak, but they don't tolerate uselessness. I'm not useless. Then you'll have to demonstrate that. His eyes moved to her. Every single day, she held his gaze. And you? Will you protect me? From real danger. Yes, and from... I won't shield you from every challenge. His voice was direct but not harsh. Like a doctor giving a diagnosis that isn't good but isn't cruel either. If I do, they'll never respect you. Never see you as anything but a burden I chose to carry. A pause. You want to survive Shadowfen? You'll have to fight for your place in it. Not what she'd hoped for. But when I was 8, she said, after a moment, my wolf manifested for the first time. Everyone thought it would grow, get stronger. My parents said give it time. She watched the stream moving over the stones. My parents died when I was 11, and the wolf never got much bigger. Kaelin said nothing. Aldrich taught me healing instead. Plants, medicines. How to read a body's signals. The things that could be learned without needing to be the largest wolf in the room. She looked at her hands, calloused from garden work, stained faintly from years of herbs. I've been making myself useful by other means for as long as I can remember. That's a skill, he said, not warmly. But it wasn't nothing either. Most wolves never develop it. They rely on size and they stop there. Size is easier, size is, he pushed off the tree, rest for a few more minutes. Then we go, he walked to the other side of the clearing, giving her space, or giving himself space. She wasn't sure which. She touched the ring on her finger, too large. Still tilting sideways, she straightened it. It tilted back. Her grandmother had told her that love grew where it was tended. She looked at Kaelin Dusk, standing at the edge of the clearing, watching the dark with the patience of someone who'd learned that the dark usually did something eventually. You just had to be willing to wait long enough. She wasn't sure what she was tending, but she was here. She was moving. She was doing something she'd never done before at any of those 4 ceremonies at that table behind the oak. She was trying. They arrived at Shadowfen as the sky turned the gray pink of coming dawn. Clara saw the territory before she saw the settlement. The quality of the trees changed. Taller, older, darker. The underbrush thickened. Even the air tasted different. Heavier, charged with something ancient that she felt more in her sternum than in her lungs. Then the valley. She'd expected something like Ridgecrest. Neat cottages, communal spaces, a green. Order. Shadowfen was not order. Shadowfen was stone houses built into the hillside like they'd grown there. Long wooden structures with smoke curling from their chimneys. Training yards where wolves sparred in the early gray light with an efficiency that didn't look like practice. It looked like language. Like the only language some of these people trusted, and everywhere. Wolves, dozens of them, already awake, already watchful, all turning as Kaelin and Clara entered the settlement. The whispers started immediately. She caught pieces. Is that her? She's so small. He actually went through with it. Why would he? She kept her eyes forward and her chin up. She'd gotten good at that tonight. She suspected she was going to need to be much better at it. Kaelin's hand settled at the small of her back. That same warm, steady pressure. Directing her without controlling her. Protective without requiring her to disappear behind it. She was grateful for it in a way she hadn't expected to be. A woman waited on the steps of the large stone building at the settlement center, tall, powerful. Silver blonde hair pulled into a severe braid. Leather training clothes that had been worn through and repaired and worn through again. The build of someone who spent her days making other people understand what consequence felt like. Her eyes found Clara immediately. Swept her from head to foot with an expression so perfectly calibrated to convey, is this really what we're dealing with, that Clara almost admired the precision of it. So this is the famous mate, the woman said. Kaelin, you could have at least chosen someone who looks like she'll survive the week, Bryn. Kaelin's voice held a note Clara hadn't heard before. Almost a warning. Almost. What? I'm being practical. Bryn's eyes didn't leave Clara. The council's inside. They're not happy. They never are. They're invoking the right of assessment. Something changed in Kaelin's face. Just for a moment. There and gone before she could name it. Of course they are. Clara looked between them. What's the right of assessment? Bryn's smile was the specific smile of someone who is not trying to make you feel better. Pack law, she crossed her arms. When an alpha brings an outside mate into the pack, the council can test whether she's worthy. 3 trials, strength, knowledge, endurance, a pause that she let breathe. Most fail. Most don't have an alpha willing to defend them, Kaelin said. Cold, flat. You can't defend her through all 3 trials, Kaelin. That's not how it works, and you know it. They looked at each other. Something passing between them that Clara couldn't read. The shorthand of people who'd known each other long enough to have entire arguments without using words. Take us to the council, Kaelin said. Let's get this done. The Great Hall was exactly what the building had promised. Massive, austere. Long stone table, 5 wolves seated in judgment. 3 men, 2 women, all older, all radiating the authority of people who'd earned their positions and had no intention of relinquishing them. They stood when Kaelin entered. Their eyes went to Clara immediately. The eldest man spoke first. Gray-haired, one side of his face a map of old scars. His voice carried the weight of someone who'd been the last word in the room for a very long time. AlphaKing. Welcome home. A pause that lasted a beat too long. We received word you'd found a mate at Ridgecrest. Not word. Fact, Kaelin brought Clara forward, not roughly but clearly. This is Clara Dawn, my chosen mate. She is under my protection and entitled to all rights of an alpha's mate, if she's worthy, said one of the women. Middle-aged, sharp-featured, eyes that moved like they were already calculating the next 3 steps before this one was finished. The council invokes the right of assessment. We must know what she brings to Shadowfen. She brings herself. That's enough. No, the scarred man said. Firmly, no apology in it. It isn't. You've led this pack back from the edge by enforcing our laws, Kaelin. You can't ignore them now because they're inconvenient. He wasn't asking. The silence in the room turned specific. Clara stepped forward before she'd entirely decided to. What does the assessment involve? 5 pairs of eyes fixed on her. The surprise was almost imperceptible. Almost. The scarred man, she would learn his name was Elder Harwick, leaned back and studied her. 3 trials. Over 3 days. Combat. Knowledge. Endurance. A pause. Pass all 3 and you're accepted as one of us, and if I fail one, you leave Shadowfen. The calculating woman's expression didn't change. The mate bond dissolves. That's not how mate bonds work. It is when the council rules the bond invalid. The woman's smile had no warmth in any direction. We've done it before. Clara felt the ground shift. She'd thought the bond was a fixed thing, sacred. And apparently here, even that could be unmade. Kaelin's jaw was set. She could see the calculation in him, the awareness of the trap. If he fought too hard for her, he'd undermine everything he'd built. An alpha who held his pack to strict standards but bent those standards for his chosen mate wasn't an alpha anyone respected. He knew it. The council knew he knew it. This is unnecessary, he said, his voice careful. She's been here less than an hour, then she can begin when she's rested, Harwick said. Tomorrow. Combat. At noon, Clara looked at Kaelin. He didn't look back. He was looking at the table, which told her everything. I'll do it, she said. The room went quiet. Clara, I'll do the assessment. She looked at Kaelin directly now, made sure he saw she meant it. You told me I'd have to fight for my place. Every single day, a breath. Might as well start. Something moved through his expression. Not quite surprise. Not quite relief. Something that lived between them. Harwick looked at her with something she couldn't immediately categorize. Then he smiled. Just slightly. I like her spirit. He looked at Kaelin. Let's see if she has anything else. He stood. The other council members followed. The first trial begins tomorrow at noon, he said. Combat. You'll face one of our pack in the training yard. Not to death, a pause. But not gentle either. Standard dominance contest. Submission or unconsciousness, Clara's stomach dropped combat. Against wolves who'd trained their entire lives. Against opponents who outweighed her by 50 pounds and had been fighting since before she'd learned to read. She was going to lose. Everyone in this room knew it. But if she didn't try, if she backed down before it even started, if she showed them, in the very first hour, that she was exactly what they already believed her to be, I understand, she said. The council filed out, the room emptied, until it was just her and Kaelin. He turned to look at her. The controlled face was there, but something underneath it. You didn't have to agree to that. What choice did I have? Said, no. She looked at him, straight. And proved them right before the trials even started? She wrapped her arms around herself. The exhaustion was hitting now, the full weight of everything. The ceremony, the journey, the bond, this room, those eyes. If I'm going to fail, I'd rather fail trying, a beat. You're not what I expected, he said. What did you expect? He considered. Someone who'd be grateful. I am grateful, she met his gaze. But gratitude doesn't mean I stop thinking. Something in the corner of his mouth moved. Fractional. But there, no, he said. I suppose it doesn't. He walked to the door. Paused. There are 4 hours before tomorrow noon, he said. I'll teach you what I can. Will it help? Probably not, he said it without cruelty, just clarity. But you'll go in knowing it wasn't because you didn't prepare. He left. Clara stood in the empty great hall, torches casting unsteady light across the stone walls, weapons hanging in rows. The particular silence of a place that had held hard conversations for a very long time, and had learned not to be surprised by them. She touched the ring on her finger. Still too large, still tilting. She straightened it. It tilted back. She thought about her grandmother's rocking chair, about the water stain on the ceiling shaped like a bird, about Aldrich pressing herbs into her hands and saying, use it. She thought about Kaelan standing at the edge of the clearing in the dark, watching, waiting. She was going to lose tomorrow. She knew that. But she'd stood on that platform and felt the silence stretch, and she hadn't run. She'd walked into this valley with a braid and a travel pack and a ring that didn't fit, and she hadn't run. One more day of not running. That was all she had to do. Her grandmother had told her love grew where it was tended, Clara Dawn. Who had never been chosen, who had sat alone at 4 ceremonies in the same gray dress, who had a mind sharper than her situation had ever required her to use. Clara Dawn looked around the hall that was going to be her proving ground and started to plan. She didn't sleep, not really. She lay in the bed Kaelin had shown her to. Soft mattress, wool blanket, a window that looked out over the training yards. And she stared at the ceiling and she thought, that was the thing about her mind. It didn't stop. It had never stopped. While her wolf stayed small and her body stayed slight, and the world kept finding new ways to remind her what she lacked, her mind just kept running, kept cataloging, kept filing things away for later. Later was now. 4 hours until noon, 4 hours until she walked into a training yard in front of an entire pack that had already decided what she was, and proved them right, or didn't. She knew which one was more likely. She thought about Kaylin's voice in the great hall. Probably not. Not a lie. Not cruelty. Just the specific honesty of a man who'd learned that false comfort costs more than it saves in the long run. She respected it. She also really wished, in this one particular moment, that someone would lie to her just a little. She got up before dawn. Kaylin was already in the small training room behind the pack house when she found him. No ceremony about it. He was standing in the center of the space with his arms crossed, waiting, like he'd known she'd come early. Maybe he had. You said 4 hours, she said. It's 4 hours. It's 3.5. Then we have extra. He uncrossed his arms. Stand here. She stood where he pointed. What followed was not encouraging. Not because Kaylan was a bad teacher. He wasn't. He was precise and patient and didn't waste words on things that didn't matter. He showed her defensive stances. How to protect her throat and belly. How to fall without breaking something important. How to roll with impact instead of fighting it. All of which was useful. All of which was also the curriculum of someone preparing to lose gracefully. He wasn't teaching her how to win. He was teaching her how to survive losing with some dignity intact. She knew it. He knew she knew it. Neither of them said it out loud. When she comes at you, he said, don't try to match her speed, because I can't. Because you can't. So don't try. Move sideways. Redirect. Make her work for every contact, and when she gets through anyway, she will get through, and when she does, get up. She looked at him. That's the strategy? Get up? That's the foundation. He held her gaze. Everything else is built on that. She thought about that. Aldrich taught me something. Years ago, she started again. About using an opponent's force instead of opposing it. Kaylin's eyes sharpened, just slightly. Show me. She tried to demonstrate. Her form was rough. She'd learned it theoretically, helping Aldrich manage resistant patients. Not in any actual combat context. Kaylin watched. Again. He said she did it again. The angle's wrong. Here, he adjusted her arm. His hands were careful, precise. The hands of someone who knew exactly how much force to use and had never once used more than that. You're fighting the motion. Stop fighting it. Go with it. Past it, she tried. Better again. Better still, which from Kaylin, she was starting to understand, was high praise. They worked until the light changed. Until the gray pre-dawn became something approaching morning. Until Clara's arms ached and her footwork was slightly less catastrophic than it had been an hour before. Then he stopped. Eat something, he said. You'll need it. He walked out. She stood in the empty training room. Looked at her reflection in the small metal mirror hung on the wall. Same face. Same dark hair, half escaped from last night's braid. Same slight frame that had never been what anyone wanted it to be. Different eyes, maybe. She couldn't be sure. The training yard was packed by noon. Word traveled fast in Shadowfen. The new alpha mate, the outsider, the runt from Ridgecrest who Kaylin had claimed at some ceremony in the lowlands, was going to fight. Not just fight. Was going to fight Bryn. Bryn Caldwell. Head warrior. 15 years in that position. Built from something harder than ordinary muscle. The kind of fighter who made other fighters feel like they'd been fundamentally misunderstanding the concept of fighting their whole lives. Clara stood at the edge of the yard and breathed. Just breathed. The crowd pressed close. Dozens of wolves, some openly interested, some openly contemptuous. Children pushed to the front and were pulled back by adults who weren't sure what exactly was appropriate for children of Nsrun to witness. Kaylin stood at the far edge of the yard. He'd told her he wouldn't intervene. Couldn't. She'd understood that. But understanding something and standing here in the actual moment, with the actual weight of it pressing down on you. Those were different things. Elder Harwick stepped into the center of the yard. By pack law and the right of assessment, Clara Dawn will face trial by combat. The contest continues until submission, unconsciousness, or a pause. The particular pause of a man choosing his words carefully. The judges prefer the first two options. Nervous laughter, somewhere. Clara didn't find it funny. But she understood the function of it. Bryn stepped into the yard. She was already in fighting leathers, already warm, already looking at Clara the way a person looks at a problem they've already solved and are simply waiting to confirm. Shift and fight, Harwick said, or fight as human. Your choice. Shifting meant revealing her wolf. Small, quiet, the thing she'd been ashamed of since she was 11 years old. Putting it on display in front of an entire pack that was already looking for reasons to reject her. Human, she said. Harwick nodded. Bryn didn't blink. Last chance to walk away, Bryn said, quiet enough that it was almost private between them. No one would blame you. Clara met her eyes. I would. Harwick raised his hand. 3. Clara settled into the stance Kaelin had shown her. Weight distributed. Arms up. Chin tucked. 2. Bryn rolled her neck once. A small, professional gesture. The kind of thing you do when the outcome is not in doubt and you're just preparing the body for the work ahead. 1. Bryn moved. Fast. Clara had known she was fast. Knowing and experiencing were entirely different things. The first hit connected before Clara had fully processed it was coming. A strike to the ribs that drove the air out of her lungs in one hard exhale. She staggered. Her arms came up on instinct, too slow. A second hit, then a sweep. Foot hooking behind her ankle, the ground rushing up to meet her. She hit the dirt, the crowd reacted. Sound washing over her like a wave. Get up, she got up, her ribs screamed. She ignored them. She'd learned to be good at ignoring the things her body said were impossible. Bryn came at her again, and again, and again. Each time, Clara tried to move sideways, to redirect, to use the techniques from 3.5 hours of desperate practice in a cold training room. Some of it worked, pieces of it. Enough to make Bryn adjust slightly, not enough to change the fundamental trajectory of the outcome. She went down 12 times in the first 10 minutes. She got up 12 times. The crowd had gone quiet somewhere around the 6th time. That particular silence that falls when something unexpected is happening, and no one's entirely sure what to make of it yet. Her lips split. She tasted blood. Iron and salt. Bryn's expression had changed. Clara caught it between the 6th and 7th time she hit the ground. Something shifting in Bryn's face. Not softening. Nothing that simple. More like recalibration. The expression of someone who'd gone in with one set of assumptions and was now running a different calculation entirely. Good, Clara thought from somewhere underneath the pain. Good. Notice me. She stood up the 7th time with her arms shaking. Bryn came at her, and Clara stopped trying to win. That was the thing. She'd been trying to win. Some part of her had still been hoping. Still running the math, looking for the angle that would change the outcome. She stopped. She breathed. She watched. Bryn's next strike came from the right. Fast. Committed. Clara didn't block it. She went with it. The technique Aldrich had taught her years ago. What Kaelin had adjusted in the training room that morning. Stop fighting the motion. Go with it. Past it. She turned into Bryn's momentum. Pivoted. Used the force of it to redirect. Not much, just enough. Just the small mechanical thing of not being exactly where the force expected her to be. Bryn's boot caught nothing but air. Bryn stumbled. 1 step. 2, barely. But real, the crowd made a sound she'd never heard directed at her before. Not cheering exactly. Something more complicated. The sound of surprise encountering something it hadn't budgeted for. Bryn caught herself, turned back, and looked at Clara differently. It lasted a second. Maybe less. Then Bryn came back. She didn't hold back now. Not the careful, controlled pressure of before. This was faster. More. Clara could tell the difference and filed it away, even as the hits kept coming. She's taking me seriously. Down again. Up again. Down up. 15 times total. 15 times Clara Dawn went to the dirt of the Shadowfin training yard and got back up. Not gracefully, not quickly, by the end. The last few times were slow. Were painful to watch, she suspected, from the outside. Were an act of pure stubbornness with nothing behind it, but the absolute refusal to give them what they came for. The 16th time, she didn't make it all the way up. Her arms got her to hands and knees, her legs got her halfway. And then Bryn's hand closed around the back of her collar. Not rough. Controlled. Professional. Bryn's other hand pressed Clara's chin up, the position of dominance. Throat exposed. The ending. Submit, Bryn said. Still quiet. Still almost private. You've done enough. Clara's vision was gray at the edges. Her arms were shaking. Every single thing hurt. She caught Kaelin in her peripheral vision. standing at the edge of the yard where he'd been the entire time. Face controlled, expression unreadable. But his eyes were on her, and in his eyes. Not pity, not the resigned disappointment of a man watching an investment fail, something she couldn't quite name. Something that looked, from this distance, through the gray edges of her vision, like it might be. Don't read into it, she told herself. Submit. Stand up with dignity. This is over. Submit, Bryn said again. Clara closed her eyes and made herself remember the table behind the oak tree, the lanterns she couldn't quite reach, the sound of 17 pairings happening while she held a warm cup of watered-down wine and counted heartbeats. 23 years of being the wolf that no one's eyes landed on. The specific humiliation of being called and standing there and hearing nothing but silence answer back. She'd survived all of that. She'd stood through all of that. This was pain, but it was different pain. This was pain that meant she was somewhere, that she was in the fight, that she was part of the thing instead of watching from the edge of it. This kind of pain she could stand. No, she said. Bryn went still. What? No. Clara got her hands under her, pushed, made it to her knees. Her arms were shaking so badly she could barely hold herself up. I don't submit. A beat. Just one. Then she got her foot under her, found the ground, pushed up, stood barely, swaying. Blood on her lip, and probably her face and definitely her pride. But standing. She raised her fists. Bryn stared at her. The yard was silent in the way that a room goes silent when everyone has forgotten to breathe at the same time. Then Bryn did something. She laughed, not mockery, not the sharp, cruel sound from the pack house steps the night before. Something genuine, brief. The laugh of someone who has been surprised in a way they didn't expect to be surprised, and who respects the source of that surprise even while being caught off guard by it. She reached out and took Clara's arm, not to throw her, not to finish the contest. She held Clara's arm to keep her from falling over, which Clara was, in fairness, about to do. You're done, Bryn said. Still quiet. I'm calling it. I haven't submitted. No, Bryn's grip steadied her. You haven't. Something in her expression that Clara couldn't quite read. A door opening a crack and closing before she could see what was behind it. Shadowfen remembers that. She released Clara's arm, stepped back, looked at Elder Harwick. I'm satisfied with the assessment, she said. Trial complete. Harwick's eyebrows rose. The trial ends in submission or unconsciousness. Someone in the crowd said, She hasn't. I'm the one in the yard, Bryn said without turning around. I decide when I'm satisfied. And I'm satisfied, she looked at Harwick. The trial is complete. She moves to the second assessment. Harwick looked at the crowd, looked at the council members, looked at Clara, who was held upright by approximately willpower and spite at this point. Trial by combat. Assessed, he said slowly. Clara Dawn has demonstrated courage under certain defeat. The right of assessment continues. Second trial, tomorrow morning. Knowledge, the yard erupted, not clean cheering, not unanimous. The sound of a pack that had come in with one expectation and was leaving with a different set of questions about whether that expectation had been entirely justified. Clara's legs decided they'd done enough. She was going down before she'd fully processed it. Strong hands caught her. Kaelin. Somehow already there. I've got you, he said. She wanted to say something. Something useful. What came out was, I didn't submit. No, he said. You didn't. He picked her up, not asking, just doing it. Like, it was the next obvious step in a logical sequence. The crowd parted around them. She caught faces as they moved through, not the contempt from before. Not the satisfied pity of people who'd seen what they'd expected. Something different, uncertain. The specific look of people rearranging their understanding of a situation they thought they'd already figured out. She heard pieces behind them. Bryn pulled her punches at the end. Did you see? She pulled. Yeah, but did you see her get up? She closed her eyes and let Kaelin carry her, just this once. The pack healer's name was Rowena, older than Aldrich. Hands like something carved from driftwood, weathered and strong and remarkably gentle for their appearance. She clicked her tongue at Clara's ribs and said things like, well, that'll need wrapping in the tone of someone who'd seen much worse and was being charitable about categorizing this. Kaelin stayed. He stood by the window the entire time Rowena worked, looking out over the settlement, not speaking. Just present. The second trial, Clara said when Rowena had finished. Knowledge. What will they ask? Everything, Kaelin said. He turned from the window. Pack law, Shadowfen history, healing, territory. Survival. They'll look for gaps. Counselor Hext will direct the harder questions. He looked at her. How do you know about Hext? She found me within an hour of arriving. Clara adjusted carefully, wincing. Told me about her daughter. The arrangement you broke. A pause. She found you that fast. She's efficient. Something moved through his expression. What did she say exactly? That she'd make me fail. That she had enough influence on the council to arrange it. Clara met his eyes. She was being honest. I appreciated that. At least I knew where she stood. Kaelin was quiet for a moment. She's not wrong about her influence, he said finally. Hext has been on the council for 49 years. She built those alliances carefully. Then I need to be better than her alliances can account for. He looked at her. The books, she said. Whatever you have on Shadowfen law, pack history. I need them tonight. You should sleep. I should also have better ribs. She held out her hand. Books, Kaelin. He looked at her hand. Then he went and got the books. She read until the candle burned low. Kaelin left her to it, mostly. He appeared once with food she didn't ask for and wouldn't have thought to request. Flatbread and something warm from the kitchen, which she ate one-handed while reading with the other. He reappeared an hour later with a second candle. Didn't say anything. Just set it down and left again. She filed that away, too. Into the growing collection of small, specific things she was learning about him that had nothing to do with the arrangement they'd entered. Shadowfen law was dense. Specific. Built over generations in a place where specificity was survival. Every clause existed because someone, at some point, had tried to exploit its absence. Every precedent cited a moment when the lack of a rule had cost someone something they couldn't get back. She read about the bond dissolution clause. Read it 3 times. Counselor Hext's questions would almost certainly touch it. The specific language mattered, not just the principle, the exact words. She kept reading, pack history. The 8 alphas before Kaelin, the border wars, and then the period after. She paused here, reading carefully. After the previous alpha's death, Kaelin's father, the text was spare about it. A period of significant internal restructuring under the current alpha initiated 8 years prior. Nothing more. Significant internal restructuring. That was doing a lot of work, that phrase. She thought about what Kaelin had said at the stream. Nothing worth keeping. And everything that needed to be fixed. She set that aside and kept reading. By the time the second candle started guttering, she had 17 pages of notes in her grandmother's recipe book. The only blank pages she'd brought with her, and a plan for every category of question she could anticipate. She couldn't prepare for everything, but she could make sure that when Counselor Hext tried to find a gap, she'd have to look very hard to locate one. The second trial began at 10 in the morning. Great hall. Same long table. Same 5 council members. But the room was fuller this time. Word had traveled after the training yard, and apparently knowledge trials attracted a different kind of attention. People who wanted to see whether she had anything beyond stubbornness. Clara stood before them. Her ribs were wrapped. Her lip was still split. She'd braided her hair tightly and put on the cleanest clothes she had. She looked, she was aware, like someone who'd just been through a fight. She supposed that was accurate. Elder Harwick opened the proceedings. Counselor Hext started the questions before he'd finished explaining the format. Recite the 3 foundational laws of pack hierarchy, clean. Fast. Designed to set the pace and establish control. Clara answered without hesitation. First, the Alpha's authority is absolute in matters of pack security and survival. Second, rank is earned through demonstrated strength, but rank carries the obligation to protect those beneath it. Third, any challenge for position must be witnessed and conducted fairly, or the challenger is subject to exile. Hext's expression didn't change. Grounds for dissolution of a mate bond. There it was. Early. Clara had expected it. A mate bond may be dissolved through mutual consent of both parties, through the death of one party, or through a unanimous council ruling in cases of documented severe harm, proven betrayal, or incompatibility that demonstrably threatens pack stability. She paused. Let the next part land the way she'd planned it to land. Council rulings on dissolution require unanimity, she continued. Not majority, unanimity. Because interference with a mate bond is considered an action of last resort under the original founding charter, and the drafters of that charter required the highest possible threshold of agreement before such interference could be authorized. Hext's eyes narrowed. The unanimity clause. Clara had found it at approximately 2 in the morning. A footnote in a charter document so old the ink had faded to brown. Correct, Hext said. The word came out like something bitten through. The questions kept coming word territories. Treaties, land management, water rights, the specific protocols for disputed boundary crossings, the history of the right of assessment. Who had invoked it, when, what the outcomes had been. Every failed assessment in the last 40 years, every past one. Clara answered, and answered, and answered. An hour passed. Her ribs ached, her feet ached more, but she stood and she answered and she did not let her voice waver. After the fourth failed attempt to find a gap, Hext's questions shifted. Less technical. More searching. What do you understand about Shadowfen's history under its previous leadership? There it is. Clara looked at the table for a moment. Then up at Hext. Enough to understand what the current Alpha rebuilt, she said carefully. And why the pack you have now values what it values. Be specific. The pack went through a period of significant instability. What came out of it was a community that doesn't tolerate weakness, not because it's cruel, but because it learned that weakness costs. Real costs. The kind you can't undo. She kept her voice level. I understand that. I don't resent it. I just need the chance to show that I'm not the kind of weakness it needs to protect against. Hext looked at her for a long moment, then, almost imperceptibly, moved on. Elder Harwick held up his hand. Final question. And this one comes from all of us. The other council members nodded. You've demonstrated you can recall information, Harwick said. Now tell us something we can't find in any book. In your own words, what does Shadowfen need most? And what can you give it that we don't already have? Silence. Clara looked at the 5 faces in front of her. Then she looked past them, out the high window at the end of the hall where she could see a slice of the settlement. The training yards. The stone buildings. Smoke from the chimneys, Then she looked at the door where she could see, barely, 2 children standing in the corridor, watching Zai through the gap. The way children watch things they're not supposed to see, with their whole bodies, holding completely still. She thought about Aldrich saying, don't forget what you're worth. She thought about Kaelin saying, I'm not surrendering what I built. She thought about 15 trips to the dirt and what it cost to get up from each one. She said, Shadowfen has strength, more than most packs I'll ever encounter. You don't need me to add to it. She looked at Harwick directly. What a pack like this risks, what any pack risks when strength is the primary currency, is forgetting what the strength is for. You fight to protect something. But the more you fight, the easier it is to lose track of the thing you started fighting for. She paused. I spent 23 years being overlooked. I learned to notice things other people didn't bother noticing because I had time. Because I wasn't the one everyone was watching, she let that sit. I notice things. I remember things. I make connections that other people miss because they're busy being strong. She looked down the row of faces. I can be the person in this pack who remembers what you're fighting for. When everything is moving fast and everyone is focused on the threat directly in front of them, I can be the one who looks sideways, who reads the fine print, who finds the thing nobody thought to look for. Silence. Hext opened her mouth. Harwick raised his hand. Not aggressively. Just the gesture of a man who's heard enough to decide. Sufficient, he said. He looked at the other council members. One by one, they nodded. All eyes moved to Hext, the longest pause of the entire morning. Hext looked at Clara. The calculating eyes doing whatever their final calculation was. Then, sufficient, Harwick stood. Clara Dawn passes the second trial. The right of assessment continues. Third trial, endurance. Beginning at sunset today, Clara heard the words, filed them. Then the room started to tilt slightly. She gripped the edge of the table very carefully so no one would notice. Kaelin was beside her before she'd entirely registered he'd moved. You're pale, he said, quietly. I'm fine. You're gripping the table. I'm fine, he didn't argue. But he stayed close. Bryn stopped near the door. She didn't make a thing of it. Just looked at Clara and gave her the smallest nod, one professional to another. Clara nodded back. Sunset, the third trial, Elder Harwick explained the terms with the brevity of a man who'd given this explanation before and saw no reason to embellish it. 3 days alone in the forest beyond the eastern ridge. No supplies. No weapons. No assistance. Return to the boundary of Shadowfen lands by dawn of the 3rd day. Do that, and the trial was complete. The entire pack gathered at the boundary to watch her go. Of course they did. Clara stood at the edge with the last light falling gold across the settlement behind her. The air was cold. Getting colder, she could feel the temperature dropping already as the sun went down. She looked back. Kaelin stood with the pack. A distance between them that the rules required. Their eyes met. She felt the mate bond pulse, thin still, new, but there. That thread of warmth in the center of her chest that had been slowly growing since the ceremony in Ridgecrest. It was going to ache when she got far enough away. He'd told her that. The bond didn't like distance. Not this early. She'd handle it. She'd handled worse. She turned and walked into the forest. The first night was almost manageable. Cold, yes. Hungry by midnight, yes. The darkness in this forest was different from the darkness at home. Denser, more layered, full of sounds she didn't have names for yet, but manageable. She found a rocky overhang in the first hour, out of the wind. She gathered pine boughs for insulation the way her grandmother had shown her once. She made a fire with the flint of 2 specific stones. Aldrich had taught her that during one of her many afternoons in his workshop, saying you never know what you'll need. And ate exactly nothing because there was nothing to eat and she refused to do something desperate just because she was hungry. Desperate decisions made in desperation are still desperate decisions. She'd wait until morning. She lay by her small fire, listened to the forest. The mate bond ached. A dull, steady pull, like a compass needle that keeps swinging back no matter how many times you turn the compass. Shadowfen was that way. Callan was that way. She thought about what she'd said in the Great Hall. I can be the one who looks sideways. She meant it. She genuinely meant it. But saying a thing in the controlled environment of a formal proceeding and living a thing, those were different species of commitment. She closed her eyes. She thought about the water stain on her grandmother's ceiling. Shaped like a bird in flight, somewhere between where you are and where you're going, her grandmother used to say about birds. They don't belong to either place. That's why they can go anywhere. She'd never understood that. She thought maybe she was starting to, the second day. She woke before dawn and dealt with the problem of food. A stream 30 yards from her overhang, she'd heard it in the night. She followed the sound. Found it, drank, then spent 40 minutes constructing something that might, with charitable interpretation, be called a fish trap. Weighted rocks carefully arranged, in the shallower section where the current slowed. It wasn't elegant. It worked. 2 small fish by mid-morning. Ate them cooked because she'd learned, from Aldrich, which parasites were not theoretical. Aldrich had been aggressively educational about parasites. She'd thought it was excessive at the time. She kept moving through the day. Stayed oriented by the sun. Noted landmarks. Found a second water source. Located a stand of pine trees dense enough to sleep under. The mate bond had gone from aching to something more insistent. Not quite pain. More like the feeling of a sound just below hearing. Present enough to register. Just out of reach enough to not be able to locate precisely. She thought about Kaelin. Not the abstract thought of the Alpha who chose me for political reasons. The specific, particular thought of the man who'd adjusted her arm in the training room. Who'd brought food she didn't ask for. Who'd brought a second candle without saying a word about it. Who'd held her when her legs gave out in the training yard with the same matter-of-fact efficiency with which he did everything else. Or maybe she was cold and hungry and reading too much into candlelight. Probably that. Night 2. She was sitting by her fire, arms wrapped around her knees. Watching the flames, then footsteps. She sat up straight. A figure came through the trees. Not attacking. Moving deliberately. The pace of someone who wanted to be heard coming. The figure stepped into the firelight. She knew the face. Not well. But enough, one of Counselor Hext's aides. A young woman, maybe 20. Who'd been standing at the edge of the Great Hall during the knowledge trial, carrying a pack that smelled, even from here, like actual food, and a folded blanket. And the specific expression of someone who has been given an errand they're not entirely comfortable with. The counselor sends her compliments, the young woman said. Carefully rehearsed, and asks if you might reconsider your position. Clara looked at her. You've proven yourself, the young woman continued. 2 trials completed. No one questions your courage. You could return now, with dignity. And no one would. What's your name? Clara asked. The young woman blinked. Petra. Clara looked at the pack and the blanket. Did the counselor tell you what to do if I said no? She said you'd say no. A pause. honest admission from someone who hadn't been given permission to be honest. She said, "Bring the things anyway, in case you changed your mind later." Clara looked at the food. She was genuinely hungry. She looked at the blanket. She was genuinely cold. She thought about what it would mean to take them. Not just the obvious thing, that it would be cheating, that it would invalidate everything she'd built in the last 2 days. The other thing. The thing underneath. She'd started this trial alone. If she finished it with Hext's supplies, she'd be finishing it on Hext's terms. As someone who needed what Hext had to offer. As someone who could be bought or persuaded or waited out. She looked at Petra. "Tell the counselor I appreciate the thought," she said. "And tell her, this is important, so say it exactly. Tell her that I'm not staying out here for Kaylin. I'm staying because I want to know if I can do it." Petra blinked. "I'm staying because this is my choice. Not his, not hers. Mine." Clara met the young woman's eyes. "Can you remember that?" Petra looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Once. Slow, I'll tell her." She picked up the pack and the blanket and left the way she came. Clara turned back to her fire. Her stomach made its opinion known. She ignored it. She'd made the right call. She was certain of that. She was also certain that being right about something didn't make you any less hungry. She lay down, pulled her cloak tighter, watched the fire burn low. And for the first time in a long time, maybe ever, she felt something she didn't immediately have a word for. Not happy exactly. Not comfortable. She was cold and her ribs still hurt, and she was lying on packed dirt a very long way from any bed she'd ever slept in. But she was here. She was choosing to be here. Not because someone chose her. Not because there was no other option. Because she wanted to know if she could. And she was finding out. She slept, dawn of the 3rd day. She woke cold and stiff, and immediately aware of approximately every part of her body. She put out her fire, oriented by the growing light. Started moving. The forest was different in the early morning. The quality of the darkness changing, going from solid to something more porous as the light found ways through. She moved steadily. The mate bond had settled in the night. Not absent. Just quiet. Like it had made peace with the distance and stopped pulling. Or like it trusted her to find her way back without being dragged. She thought about that. She walked. Her legs were tired. Her ribs were a persistent low-grade conversation she was having with her own body about the limits of wrapping as a pain management strategy. She walked anyway. The forest began to thin, trees giving way to scrubby brush at the edge of the valley. The quality of the air changing, she could smell the settlement. Smoke, pine resin, something cooking. Then the valley opened up, and there was the boundary, and there was Shadowfen. She stopped, just for a moment, standing at the edge of the forest with the dawn light coming over the mountains and hitting the valley below. The stone buildings catching the early light. The training yards empty this early. The wooden structures with their steady columns of smoke. Her chest did something unexpected. The mate bond pulled. Not desperate. Just glad home, something said. From somewhere deep in her that didn't speak in arguments or logic, she shook her head at herself. 6 days, said the sensible part of her. You've been here 6 days total, counting the forest. That's not enough time to. She walked down into the valley. She was 50 yards from the boundary when she saw him, Kaylin standing at the tree line's edge. Where pack territory began, alone. In the pre-dawn dark, he must have been out here for a while. He wasn't looking at her yet. He was looking at the forest, then he turned, and their eyes met. She walked the last 50 yards. Her legs gave out at approximately the 5-yard mark. She was aware of this happening, was aware of the ground coming up. His hands caught her, both of them, around her arms. Solid and immediate and somehow already there. I've got you, he said. She let herself lean, just for a second. Just long enough to find solid ground again. I made it, she said. You made it, she straightened. He didn't let go immediately, then did. She looked up at him. You were waiting, she said. I was standing here. How long? He didn't answer. Which was an answer. Elder Harwick's voice carried from behind them, where the pack had gathered. More of them than she'd expected. Many more. Clara Dawn has endured 3 days alone and returned before the 3rd dawn. His voice carried the weight of ceremony, of precedent, of something older than either of them. She has passed the final trial. He paused. The pause of a man who understands timing. Welcome to Shadowfen. Clara Dusk. Not Dawn. Dusk. Kaylin's name. Officially hers now. The pack erupted in sound. Not unanimous. not the clean, uncomplicated joy of a pack celebrating one of their own. More textured than that. Some voices full-throated, some reserved, some surprised at themselves for joining in, but sound, real sound. Directed at her, Clara Dusk, who had sat at the wrong table for 4 ceremonies in the same gray dress, Clara Dusk, who had gotten up 15 times in the training yard, Clara Dusk, who had stayed in the forest alone for 3 nights, because she wanted to know if she could. She stood in the dawn light at the edge of Shadowfen's territory, and for the first time in a very long time, she didn't have to find a reason to stay. Bryn pushed through the crowd, not gently. She stopped in front of Clara, looked at her for a long moment. The assessment eyes doing their assessment thing. Then she held out her hand. "You're tougher than you look," she said. "And you already look tougher than I expected." Clara took her hand. Bryn's grip was firm, not punishing. "Just real. Welcome to the pack," Bryn said, and walked away, no speech, no ceremony about it, which was, Clara was learning, exactly how Shadowfen showed you it meant something. Rowena appeared with a blanket that smelled like wood smoke. Threw it around Clara's shoulders without asking. Started talking about the ribs and what needed to be rewrapped in the tone of a woman who already knew the answers and found the situation professionally irritating. Pack members came forward. Ones she recognized. Ones she didn't. Names offered. Not warmly, some of them, but offered. The specific courtesy of a community acknowledging someone had done what it took. Counselor Hext appeared at the edge of the group. She didn't approach. She looked at Clara from a distance. Clara looked back. Hext's expression was not friendly. That wasn't in the vocabulary. But there was something in it that might have been the cousin of respect. The recognition of one tactical mind by another. She gave a small nod. Clara returned it. Then Hext turned and left, and Kaelin was beside her again. Not touching. Just there. The mate bond steady and warm between them, no longer straining, settled into something that felt different from 6 days ago. More real. "Hungry?" he said. Catastrophically, "Kitchen's open." She looked up at him. "Did you sleep at all?" He considered this. "No, you stood out there all night. I was standing here, Kaelin." He looked at her. She let it go. Let the observation sit between them without requiring him to respond to it. He'd stood at the edge of the forest in the dark and waited for her to come back. She didn't need him to explain it. She was starting to understand a lot of things about Kaelin Dusk that had nothing to do with the political arrangement they'd entered at a ceremony 6 days ago. She walked with him back toward the pack house. The settlement waking up around them. Morning coming over the mountains, hitting the stone buildings and the training yards. Her home. Not because it was given to her. Not because she'd been born to it. Because she'd fought for it. Bled for it. Stayed cold in a forest for 3 nights and gotten up 15 times in a training yard and read by candlelight until her eyes burned. Because she'd earned it. And no one, not Hext, not the skeptics, not anyone, could take that away. She walked into Shadowfen. Clara Dusk walked in on her own 2 feet. 10 days after the trials, Clara knew where everything was. Not the pack, not yet. That would take longer. People take longer than places. But the place itself, she had it. The creak of the 3rd stair in the pack house. The window in the archive room that let in a draft from the northwest, no matter how many times Rowena stuffed rags in the gap. The training yard that caught the afternoon light at an angle that made it almost look gentle. Almost. She knew where things were, and she was starting to know people. Bryn didn't say much, but she'd started nodding at Clara in the mornings. Not a big nod. Barely a nod at all, really. More like a controlled lowering and raising of her chin that communicated you exist, and I acknowledge that existence without committing to anything warmer. From Bryn. That was basically a declaration of deep personal affection. Rowena complained at her constantly about the ribs and whether she was resting and what exactly she thought she was doing attending council meetings while still wrapped. Clara had learned that Rowena's complaints were structured like gifts. The more she complained, the more she cared. She was apparently extremely fond of Clara. Elder Harwick had started leaving relevant documents on the archive table before she arrived in the mornings. No note. No explanation. Just the documents. There. Waiting, she didn't mention it to him. He didn't mention it to her, but she read every single one, and Kaelin was complicated. Not in a bad way. In the way that things are complicated when they started as one thing and became something else while no one was paying close attention. and now no one quite knows what to call the new thing. He was present. Consistently present. He didn't disappear into pack business and surface only for necessity. He appeared at meals. He appeared at the end of council meetings. He appeared without explanation in the archive room sometimes, reading his own materials on the opposite side of the table. He didn't talk a lot during these appearances. That was fine. Clara didn't need talking. She'd spent years in rooms where people talked constantly about nothing and managed to make her feel more alone than silence ever had. This silence was different. This silence was occupied. The mate bond had grown. Quietly. The way plants grow. You don't see the movement, but you look up one day and something is different. Taller. Fuller. More there. She thought about that sometimes, late at night, what it was becoming, what she was letting it become. And then, 10 days after the trials, everything changed. It started the way bad things always start, quickly. With paperwork, she was in the archive room. Morning. Third cup of something that passed for coffee in Chateaufen. She hadn't asked what it was made from, and Rowena had seemed relieved by this. She was reading through territorial records when Harwick appeared in the doorway. He wasn't carrying documents. That was the first sign. Clara, he stepped in, closed the door. There's something you need to hear before the council meets this afternoon. She set down her cup. AlphaKing of Ashmark Pack has arrived in the settlement. She waited. The name meant something. She'd read about Ashmark. Eastern Territory. Larger than Shadowfen. A pack that had spent the last 15 years growing its borders in one direction or another. He arrived an hour ago, Harwick continued, with 6 of his senior wolves. Formally. Under the council invitation protocols, which means he gave notice, 3 days' notice, which we received while you were in the forest. Harwick looked at her steadily. He's invoking the right of claiming. She knew what that was. She'd read about it in a footnote at 2 a.m. during trial preparation. She'd hoped she'd never need that particular footnote. The right of claiming, she said carefully. An unmated alpha can challenge a new mate bond within the first 30 days. If the bond was formed outside established pack territory, yes. Your bond was formed at Ridgecrest. Harwick's voice was even, professional, but she could hear what was underneath it. You've been in Shadowfen 16 days. The window is still open, and he wants to challenge Kaelin for the bond. Winner claims the mate, a pause, standard terms, combat in neutral territory. Witnessed by council representatives from all neighboring packs. She sat with that for a moment, just sat with it. A man she'd never met wanted to fight Kaelin for the right to claim her. Because of a law written before anyone in this room was born. Because she was 16 days into a bond that had started as a political transaction, and somewhere in those 16 days had become something she didn't have the right word for yet. Does Kaelin know? He's being told right now? She stood up. I want to see Croft. Harwick blinked. Clara, before the formal council meeting. I want to see him. She was already moving. Is he in the reception hall? Yes, but then I'll go there. Croft was taller than she'd expected. Not Kaelin tall, but close, broad through the shoulders. A face that had probably been handsome once, and now was something more complicated. Weathered and hard, and arranged in the permanent expression of a man who expected to get what he wanted and had rarely been disappointed in that expectation. He was standing in the reception hall with his 6 wolves ranged behind him like furniture arranged for effect. He looked at Clara when she entered, and the thing she noticed immediately, the thing she filed because she was always filing, always noticing, was that he looked at her the way you look at a complication, not a person, a variable in a calculation that needed solving. He didn't look at her like a man who wanted her. He looked at her like a man who wanted something that she was currently standing in front of. You must be the mate, he said. The word mate performed in his mouth like a legal term. I'm Clara Dusk, she held his gaze. And you're the man who showed up 16 days after my bond formed, to invoke a law that hasn't been used in 40 years. Croft's expression didn't change. I have the right. You have the legal mechanism, she said. That's not the same thing. Something shifted in his eyes. Just slightly. The recalibration of a man who expected less from this conversation than he was getting. You're not what I expected. Nobody ever is. She kept her voice level. Conversational. Can I ask you something? He waited. You have Ashmark. 15 years building it. Strong pack. Good territory. She tilted her head. What do you actually want? The smile that came was slow and careful and told her everything she needed to know. Strong neighbors make strong alliances, he said, or they make problems. Shadowfen has become very strong under your Alpha. There it was, not her. Never her, the Western Ridge. The territory that Shadowfen controlled that Ashmark wanted access to. She was the door he needed to open to get to the room he actually wanted. She kept her expression exactly where it was. Thank you, she said. For being clear, she left before he could answer. Kalen was in the Great Hall, standing at the head of the council table with his arms crossed and an expression she'd learned to read in 16 days. The controlled face was there. But under it, the precise, contained anger of a man who knew exactly what was happening and exactly how trapped he was by it. He looked at her when she walked in. She looked back. He doesn't want me, she said, immediately. No preamble, I know. He wants the Western Ridge. I know, so the actual fight is about territory. Kalen's jaw was set. My territory, my pack, and you're the legal mechanism he's using to get to both. He uncrossed his arms. If I refuse the challenge, Shadowfen is labeled an oathbreaker. Every treaty we have becomes questionable, and if you accept, then we fight. And whoever wins, he stopped. Say it, whoever wins controls the outcome. She looked at him. Can you beat him? He didn't hesitate. Yes, are you certain? A beat, shorter than a hesitation. Longer than nothing. I'm confident, he said, which was honest, which meant he wasn't certain. Which meant there was a version of this where Croft won. She thought about that version. Quickly. Then put it away. Give me tonight, she said. Kalen looked at her. Clara, one night. Before the formal challenge is accepted. Give me tonight in the archive. You're looking for a loophole. I'm looking for anything. She held his gaze. You told me to fight for my place here. That's what I'm doing. The silence stretched. One night, he said. She went to the archive room, lit every candle she could find, pulled every document that touched the right of claiming, every precedent, every footnote, every reference to adjacent laws that might share relevant language. She built a map on the long table with paper and ink, not a geographical map, a legal one. Every law connected to every other law by the threads of their shared conditions. When this law applied, what it required, what it excluded, what it assumed. She worked the way she'd always worked when something mattered. Quiet. Systematic. The part of her that had been filing and noticing and connecting things for 23 years, finally given a problem large enough to need all of it. Harwick appeared at midnight. She hadn't asked him to come. But she wasn't surprised. He set a cup of the coffee-adjacent thing on the table beside her and looked at her map. What are you looking for? He asked. Disqualifying conditions, she said. For the challenger, he was quiet for a moment. The right of claiming was written in a time when alphas claimed females as political assets, he said. The language reflects that. It's not. It requires the challenger to demonstrate fitness, she said, without looking up, specifically. To provide safe harbor to the mate being claimed, she turned a page. That's not generic language. That's specific. What does safe harbor mean in the original charter context? Harwick sat down slowly. She showed him the passage. He read it. Read it again. I haven't looked at this in 40 years. I know. Nobody's invoked the right in 40 years. She pulled another document. But the charter conditions expire. They were written in, and they weren't removed, because nobody bothered to remove them, because nobody thought they'd matter. She looked at him. They matter now. He leaned forward. She walked him through it. The right of claiming required the challenger to prove 3 things. Not 1, not 2, 3. The first 2 were the ones everyone remembered, unmated status and regional standing. The third, the one that had settled quietly into the footnotes of 40 years of disuse, required the challenger to demonstrate no unresolved blood claim within his own pack territory in the preceding decade, which meant no deaths under suspicious circumstances that had never been officially adjudicated under pack law, which meant no crimes that had been buried instead of tried. Harwick looked up from the document. Do you have evidence of something specific? I have 2 names, she said. Former Ashmark wolves who left the pack 4 years ago. I found their departure records in the territorial registry. Every wolf who changes pack affiliation is registered under regional law. Their records list their reason for departure. She slid a page across the table. Both of them cite the same incident, the same date, the same location. Harwick read. She watched his face. He was a man who'd spent decades keeping expression out of his face in council proceedings, but something moved through it now. the specific quality of surprise from someone who'd thought they understood the dimensions of a problem and just discovered a new wall they hadn't seen coming. A death, he said. Inside Ashmark territory, listed as an accident in Croft's official pack records, but both of these wolves filed separate departure statements, citing it as, and I'm reading directly, an act of deliberate harm that was concealed from the broader pack by Alpha Order, silence. These are departure statements, Harwick said carefully, not testimony. Not sworn evidence, I know. She pulled 2 more pages. That's why I need the witnesses. He looked at her. I found them, she said, through the registry network. They're both living in neutral territory. About 60 miles east of here, she looked at him steadily. If we send riders tonight, we can have written testimony by morning. Before the formal challenge proceeding begins. Harwick was quiet for a long time. The candles burned. She waited, Clara. He looked at her. If Croft discovers we're building a case against him before the formal proceeding, he'll deny it, complain about the process, and try to proceed anyway, she said. Which is why the testimony needs to arrive before he knows we have it. Harwick looked at the map she'd built. The document spread across the table. The thread of her logic running from the original charter text through 40 years of accumulated precedent to 2 departure statements in the territorial registry. He looked at her. You found this, he said slowly. In one night, I found the gap. The witnesses already existed. She met his eyes. Will you send the riders? He stood, went to the door, called for someone, and looked back at her with an expression she was still learning to read. Get some sleep, he said. We'll know by morning. She didn't sleep, but she did move to the chair by the window and close her eyes for a while. Which was almost the same thing. Morning came gray and cold. The formal challenge proceeding was set for midday. Croft and his 6 wolves were housed in the settlement's guest quarters. The man trying to take your mate bond sleeping under your roof, which Clara thought was an interesting kind of tension. Kaelin had been awake since before she woke up. She found him in the training yard, moving through forms in the early gray light, slow and deliberate, not warming up, not practicing. The specific movement of someone who needs to be doing something physical while their mind works on something else. She watched from the doorway. He moved well. She'd observed that in pieces over 16 days. But she hadn't seen it like this, unguarded, in the early morning, without the particular quality of performance that physical capability sometimes carries when it knows it's being assessed. He just moved. She walked out into the yard. He stopped when he heard her. Turned. She looked at him. He looked at her. Did you find anything? He said. Maybe. I found a legal argument, she said carefully. Whether it holds depends on testimony that may or may not arrive before noon. He looked at her for a moment. What kind of testimony? The kind that shows Croft shouldn't be permitted to invoke the right of claiming in the first place. She held his gaze. Because he has unresolved blood in his own pack. Which is a disqualifying condition under the original charter, the silence. How long have you known about that condition? Since about 2 in the morning. He looked at her. Really looked. The way he'd looked at her on the platform at Ridgecrest, that specific direct quality of attention. But different now. Fuller. Like the 16 days had given it more to work with. Clara. Don't thank me yet, she said. The testimony might not arrive in time. The council might not accept the charter language as binding. Croft might contest the whole proceeding, she exhaled. There are a lot of ways this doesn't work, and if it doesn't work, she looked at him straight, then you fight. And you win, and if you win, she said again, flat, absolute, allowing no alternative version of events, because this is your home, and I am not going anywhere, and I did not spend 3 nights in a forest and 15 rounds in a training yard to become someone's territorial bargaining chip, something in his face. There and gone. But there, no, he said quietly. You didn't. They stood in the training yard in the gray morning light, the mate bond between them doing what it had been doing for 16 days. Growing. Quietly. Without announcement. She looked away first. Not because she wanted to. I'm going back to the archive, she said. In case there's something I missed, Clara. She stopped. Turned back. Whatever happens today. He paused. Started again. Not a man who found this kind of sentence easy. You've changed things here. In 16 days. You've another stop. The specific difficulty of a man who uses words precisely and finds the precise words for this particular thing are not available. She waited. I'm not good at this, he said. I know, the bond, he exhaled. I don't think of it the way I thought of it at the beginning. She looked at him. I know that too, she said. A beat, do you? He said. Not a question. You stood at the edge of the forest all night, she said. Waiting for me to come back. She held his gaze. That wasn't because of the bond. He didn't say anything. Which was, she was learning, how Kaelin confirmed things. She nodded once. Went back inside. The testimony arrived at 11:15. 2 documents, formally structured, witnessed by a notary in neutral territory. Both bearing the signatures of former Ashmark wolves who had been living quietly 60 miles east of here for 4 years. Both describing, in specific and consistent detail, the same incident, the same date, the same location, the same conclusion. A death inside Ashmark territory, concealed by Alpha Order, not an accident, not officially adjudicated, unresolved blood. Harwick read both documents at the archive table, with Clara standing across from him and the candles still burning, even though it was almost noon. He looked up. This is sufficient, he said, under the charter language. This is sufficient to contest the right of claiming before the formal proceeding begins. Clara breathed just once. Controlled. She didn't trust herself to do more than that right now. How do we present it? She said. You and I present it to the presiding council before Croft makes his formal declaration. If the presiding council accepts the contestation, the right of claiming is suspended pending investigation. He looked at her. Clara, if Croft is formally accused of concealing a death, this doesn't end here. He'll face proceedings from the regional authority. Good, she said. He'll know it was you. Yes. He may not respond well to that. She looked at Harwick steadily. He was going to take me as a territorial asset, regardless. I don't think I've made an enemy. I think I've revealed one that already existed. Harwick studied her for a moment, then he stood. Gathered the documents. Come with me, he said. The formal proceedings were held in the Great Hall, all 5 council members. Croft and his 6 wolves on one side, Kaelan and Shadowfen's senior wolves on the other. Regional witnesses from 2 neighboring packs seated along the wall. Observers required by the right of claiming protocols to ensure fairness. Croft looked comfortable. That was the thing she noticed when she entered. He looked like a man who was already past this part and mentally arranging furniture in the room he was about to occupy. She found her seat beside Harwick. Kaelin's eyes found her immediately. She gave him nothing externally. Just a look that said wait. He waited. Harwick stood when the presiding counselor, a woman from one of the regional witness packs, invited specifically to ensure neutral oversight, called the proceedings to order. Before the formal declaration of the right of claiming is entered, Harwick said. Shadowfen Council presents a contestation. The room changed. Croft's comfortable expression didn't move. But something behind his eyes did. The presiding counselor looked at Harwick. On what grounds? Disqualifying conditions under the original charter governing the right of claiming? Harwick placed the documents on the table. Specifically, the requirement that the challenger carry no unresolved blood claim within his pack territory. In the preceding decade, he laid out both testimonies. Methodical. Complete, every word in order, the presiding counselor read. The regional witnesses leaned forward. Croft's expression had made it to something that was not quite controlled anymore. These are departure statements, one of his wolves said. Not sworn testimony. They are formally notarized witness accounts filed through neutral territory channels. Harwick said calmly. Under regional law, they carry the same evidentiary weight as sworn testimony in a formal proceeding. The notation on the filing is clear. This is a delay tactic, Croft said. His voice still level, but the edges of it different now. Shadowfen is looking for any mechanism too. Shadowfen is presenting evidence, Clara said. The room went quiet. She hadn't entirely planned to speak. Or maybe she had. She wasn't sure, but she was speaking now. 2 witnesses, she said. Same incident, same date, same location. Consistent accounts filed independently 4 years ago, when they had no reason to coordinate because they didn't know this moment was coming. She looked at Croft directly. This isn't a delay tactic. This is evidence. And evidence gets examined. Croft looked at her. The calculation in his eyes was running fast now. She could almost see it. The charter condition is clear, she continued. Unresolved blood disqualifies the right of claiming. The testimony establishes that an unresolved death exists within Ashmark territory under Alpha Croft's authority. She kept her voice level. Informational. The voice of someone presenting facts, not making arguments. The presiding council has an obligation to examine that. Before proceeding, the presiding councilor looked at the documents, looked at Clara, looked at Croft. I'm suspending the right of claiming proceeding pending a preliminary review of the contestation, she said. This session is in recess. Croft did not take this quietly. He said things. Several of them. His wolves said things too. There was a period of about 10 minutes where the great hall was considerably louder than it had been designed to accommodate, and the regional witnesses looked like people who were professionally obligated to be present for things they would very much rather not be present for. The presiding councilor said recess again. Twice. Eventually people listened to her. The hall cleared in stages. Clara stayed at the table. Just stayed. The noise faded. The room emptied. The candles burned. She looked at the documents still laid out in front of her. 2 departure statements from people she'd never met. 2 wolves who'd left Ashmark 4 years ago and put their reasons in writing because they needed to say it somewhere. Because the truth was too heavy to carry without setting it down somewhere official and real. She thought about that, about the kind of courage it takes to document something like that. When you aren't sure anyone will ever read it, someone had read it, it had mattered. She was still looking at the documents when the door opened. Bryn. She came in without ceremony, sat down across from Clara, looked at the documents. Harwick told me what you found, she said. The testimony did the real work. You found the testimony. Bryn looked at her. Nobody else was looking. Clara didn't say anything. I want to tell you something, Bryn said. And I need you to understand that I don't do this often. So, she stopped. Just listen, Clara listened. When Kalen told us he was bringing back a mate from Ridgecrest, I thought, she exhaled, I thought he'd lost his mind. I thought the political pressure had made him make a desperate choice. I thought we were getting a liability. You were fairly clear about that. I'm always clear. A pause. I was wrong. Clara looked at her. You are not what I thought you were. Bryn said, you're not what anyone thought you were. Including... She paused again, choosing words with more care than she usually bothered to use. Including Kalen, I think. Though he knew it before the rest of us did, he chose me for political reasons. He chose you because something in him recognized something in you. Bryn's voice was flat, factual, the way she said everything. The political reason was a door. What he found behind it was different, and he's known it for longer than he's admitted. She stood. I just thought you should know that. From someone who isn't him and isn't going to dress it up in pretty language. She walked to the door. Bryn, Clara said. She stopped. Thank you. Bryn gave her the nod. The controlled chin lower and raise that meant I acknowledge your existence and find that existence acceptable, and left. The presiding councilor ruled within 2 hours. The contestation was valid. The right of claiming was suspended. A formal investigation into the Ashmark incident would be referred to the regional authority. Croft was prohibited from initiating any challenge against Shadowfen's mate Bond until the investigation concluded, which could take months. Croft left, not quietly. But he left. His 6 wolves left with him. The tension that had been sitting in the settlement since the previous morning walked out the gate with them, and didn't quite disappear, but receded to a manageable distance. Clara stood in the reception hall and watched them go. She wasn't sure what she felt. Not triumphant, not the clean satisfaction of a thing accomplished, more like the specific exhaustion that comes after a sustained effort finally stops being required. The muscles releasing, the focused attention dispersing into something softer. She felt someone behind her. She knew before she turned. Kalen, standing about 3 feet back. Present without requiring acknowledgement. In his way, she turned anyway. He looked at her. It's done, she said. For now, he'll come back. Probably, he'll find a different mechanism. He will. Kalen looked at her, and when he does, we'll deal with that, we. She noticed that, filed it. They walked back through the settlement together. Evening coming. The sky above the mountains going the particular orange-pink of cold weather sunsets. The settlement settling into its evening sounds, fire, voices. The distant clang of the training yard where someone was always training, because this was Shadowfen and rest was apparently a concept for other packs. They didn't talk. They didn't need to. She thought about what Bryn had said. What he found behind it was different. She thought about 16 days of building something out of materials that hadn't been designed for it. A bond that started as a transaction. A pack that started as a trial. A place that started as somewhere she'd been taken and was becoming somewhere she'd chosen. Kaylin held the door to the pack house. She went in, he followed. She stopped in the corridor, turned to look at him. "What happens after the investigation?" she said. "With Croft, regional authority handles it, and if they don't, if they bury it the way it was buried before, then we go back to the archive," Kaylin said simply. "And we find the next thread." She looked at him. "We," she said. He met her eyes. "We," she breathed. "I need to say something," she said, "and I need you to just listen. Don't respond right away. Just hear it." He waited. "When you chose me at Ridgecrest," she said, "I was grateful. Not because you were offering romance. Because you were offering honesty. You told me exactly what it was, and that was more than anyone had given me in a very long time." She looked at him steadily. "I came here knowing the terms. I knew what I'd agreed to." She paused. "But somewhere in these 16 days," she said, "the terms changed. Not the bond, the terms. What it means. What I think about when I'm in the archive at 2 in the morning," she exhaled. "I think about you, not the Alpha, not the arrangement. You, silence. And I don't know what to do with that," she said. "Because we started this as something functional, and I don't want to make assumptions about Clara," he said. She stopped. "I stood at the forest edge all night," he said. "You asked me about it?" "Yes. I told you I was just standing there." "Yes, I wasn't just standing there," he looked at her. Direct. The way he always was when he'd decided to say a thing. "I was standing there because I needed to know the moment you came back. Not because of the pack. Not because of the council." A pause. The specific pause of a man who uses words carefully and is finding that careful is not the same as easy. Because the idea of another stop. He shook his head slightly. "I don't have the right word for it. What did it feel like?" He thought about that. "Like something I couldn't fix," he said. "And I can fix most things. But that," he shook his head. "That I couldn't fix." She looked at him. He looked at her. The mate bond between them warm and full and entirely unlike what it had been 16 days ago in front of a crowd at Ridgecrest. "We started as a transaction," she said. "Yes. And somewhere it stopped being that, Yes. Okay," she said. He looked at her. "Okay? I just needed to know that we were both." She made a small gesture. "That I wasn't the only one." "You're not the only one," she nodded. He nodded. They stood in the corridor for a moment, in the particular silence of two people who've just said true things, and are letting those things settle into the air around them. Then Rowena appeared from around the corner with the tray and the expression of a woman who has absolutely been listening from the kitchen and is not embarrassed about it even slightly. "Food," she said. "Both of you. Now, I didn't make it for decoration." She turned around and walked back to the kitchen. Clara looked at Kaylin. He looked at her. Something happened at the corner of his mouth. The thing that happened on his face when something amused him, and he hadn't quite decided whether to let it show. She definitely heard all of that, Clara said. She hears everything, and she made food anyway. She always makes food. It's how he paused. She cares about people by feeding them. Clara thought about Aldrich and his packets of herbs, about the way people who'd spent a long time in difficult places learned to love in practical shapes, in things that could be held and used and didn't require explanation. Good instinct, she said. They went to eat. 3 days later, Bryn knocked on the door. Clara opened it behind Bryn. A girl. Young. 19, maybe 20, eyes red at the edges. A bruise along the line of her wrist that she was trying to hide under her sleeve. Carrying a bag that had been packed in a hurry by someone who hadn't known what to take. From Ashmark, Clara knew without asking. The look of someone who'd been somewhere they couldn't stay and had finally stopped pretending they could. She has nowhere to go, Bryn said. Flat. Factual. The investigations started. Things are moving inside Ashmark. Some people needed to leave. Clara looked at the girl looked at her. Wary. Tired. The specific exhaustion of someone who'd been tense. For so long, they'd forgotten what it felt like to not be. Clara knew that exhaustion. She'd worn it for 23 years. She looked past Bryn. Kaylin was at the end of the hallway. She looked at him. He gave the nod, the controlled, minimal gesture she'd watched him use in council proceedings, the one that meant yes without requiring elaboration. She turned back to the door, opened it wider. "Come in," she said. "Rowena's going to want to look at your wrist. And then you're going to eat something." She stepped back. After that, we'll figure out the rest. The girl looked at her, then stepped inside. Bryn met Clara's eyes, gave her the nod, then went back to wherever Bryn went when she wasn't making things happen. Clara closed the door, looked at the girl standing in the corridor of the pack house, holding her hastily packed bag. Looking at everything with the eyes of someone calculating whether this new place was safer than the last one. Clara understood that look, too. My name's Clara, she said. I've been here less than 3 weeks. So if you have questions about how this place works, I'll do my best. Though Rowena's better at the practical things, and Bryn knows where everything is, she paused. But if you need someone who remembers what it's like to not know whether you're allowed to be here, I can help with that. The girl looked at her. Then, slowly, something in her shoulders changed, not relaxing exactly. But the first movement toward it. Mira, she said. My name's Mira. Mira. Clara nodded. Welcome to Shadowfen that night, late, the pack house quiet. The settlement settled into its nighttime sounds, the fire in the great hall burning low. Clara sat at the window of the archive room. Not reading, just sitting, looking out at the trainings empty in the dark, the stone buildings catching starlight, the mountains behind everything, permanent and dark and indifferent to all of it. Her home, not because it had been given to her, not because she'd been born to it, because she'd walked into a dark forest and stayed there and walked back out, because she'd gotten up 15 times in the dirt, because she'd sat in an archive room with candles burning and found the thread nobody else had thought to look for, because every day, in the ways she could, she'd fought for it. The door opened. Kalan. He came in. Sat down across from her. Didn't bring anything. Didn't have a reason. Just sat down. She looked at him. He looked at her. She's settled? He said. Meaning Mira. Rowena set her up in the east room. Made her eat 3 times. Clara paused. She's okay. She will be. Kalan nodded. They were quiet for a while. There will be more, Clara said. As the Ashmark investigation continues. More wolves who need somewhere to go. Probably. We should think about how to handle that. A formal protocol. So it's not just whoever shows up at the door with nowhere else to turn. You want to build system. I want to make sure the next person who shows up gets a door that opens. She looked at him. That matters to me. He looked at her for a long moment. Then we'll build it, he said. We. Aegon. She let it settle. Outside the window, the mountains sat where they'd always been. The settlement quiet beneath them. A pack that had tested her and tried to break her and had ended up, somewhere in the process, becoming hers. She thought about a table behind an oak tree. About amber light that didn't quite reach. About a dress she'd worn to 4 ceremonies and the specific weight of sitting alone in it while life happened at all the other tables. She thought about a ring that had been too large. Still on her finger. Still slightly tilted. Still warm in a way she'd stopped questioning. She reached across the table, put her hand over Cahalan's. He looked down at it, looked up at her. She didn't say anything. He didn't say anything, but his hand turned under hers and held it. Outside, somewhere 60 miles east, 2 wolves who had written true things down 4 years ago and hoped someone would eventually read them, received notice that the regional authority had opened a formal investigation, and breathed. Inside the settlement, Mira slept through the night for the first time in months. Rowena checked on her twice and pretended she hadn't. Bryn added names to the training yard schedule for the following week because she had a feeling there would be more people coming who needed something to do with their hands. Harwick left a new stack of documents on the archive table for morning. The mountains stood where they always stood. The fire burned. And in the archive room of the Shadowfen pack house, with a candle burning low and a ring still slightly crooked on her finger, and a mate bond that had started as a transaction and become something neither of them had a precise word for. Clara Dusk. Who had never been chosen, who had sat at the wrong table for years, who had been the wolf no one wanted. Stayed exactly where she was, where she'd fought to be, and didn't let go.